Lenny removed his hat dutifully and laid it on the ground in front of him. The shadow in the valley was bluer, and the evening came fast. On the wind, the sound of crashing in the brush came to them. Lenny said, "Tell how it's gonna be." George had been listening to the distant sounds. For a moment, he was businesslike. "Look across the river, Lenny, and I'll tell you so you can almost see it." Lenny turned his head and looked off across the pool and up the darkened slopes of the Gibberlands. "We gonna get a little place," George began. He reached in his side pocket and brought out Carlson's Luger. He snapped off the safety, and the hand and gun lay on the ground beneath Lenny's back. He looked at the back of Lenny's head, at the place where the spine and the skull were joined. A man's voice called from up the river, and another man answered. "Go on," said Lenny. George raised the gun and his hand shook, and he dropped his hand to the ground again. "Go on," said Lenny. "How's it gonna be?" "We're gonna get a little place. We'll have a cow," said George, "and we'll have maybe pig and chickens, and down the flat we'll have a little piece of alfalfa." "For the rabbits," Lenny shouted. "For the rabbits," George repeated. "And I get to tend the rabbits." "And you get to tend the rabbits," Lenny giggled with happiness. "And live on the fat of the land." "Yes." Lenny turned his head. "No, Lenny, look down across the river, like you can almost see the place." Lenny obeyed him. George looked down at the gun. There were clashing footsteps in the brush now. George turned and looked toward him. "Go on, George. When are we gonna do it?" "Gonna do it soon. Me and you and me. Everybody's gonna be nice to you. Ain't gonna be no trouble. Nobody's gonna hurt no steal from 'em." Lenny said, "I thought you was mad at me, George." "No," said George. "No, Lenny, I ain't mad. I never been mad, and I ain't now. That's the thing I want you to know." The voices came close now. George raised the gun and listened to the voices. Lenny begged, "Let's do it now. Let's go to that place now." "Sure, right now. We gotta." And George raised the gun and steadied it, and he brought the muzzle of it close to the back of Lenny's head. The hand shook violently, but his face set and his hand steadied. He pulled the trigger. The clash of the shot rolled up the hills and rolled down again. Lenny jarred, then settled slowly forward to the sand, and he lay without quivering. George shivered and looked at the gun, and then he threw it from him back up on the bank near the pile of old ashes. The brush seemed filled with cries and with the sound of running feet. Slim's voice shouted, "George, where are you at? George!" But George sat stiffly on the bank and looked at his right hand that had drawn the gun away. The group burst into the clearing, and Curly was ahead. He saw Lenny lying on the ground. "Got him. By God!" He went over and looked down at Lenny, and then he looked back at George. "Right in the back of the head," he said softly. Slim came directly to George and sat down beside him. Sat very close to him. "Never you mind," said Slim. A guy got to sometimes." But Carlson was standing over George. "How'd you do it?" he asked. "I just done it," George said softly. Did he have my gun?" "Yeah, he had your gun." "And you got it away from him, and you took it, and you killed him?" "Yeah, that's how." George's voice was almost a whisper. He looked steadily at his right hand that had held the gun. Slim twitched George's elbow. "Come on, George. Me and you will get a drink." George let himself be helped to his feet. "Yeah, a drink." Slim said, "You had a, George. I swear you had a. Come on with me." He led George into the entrance of the trail and up toward the highway. Curly and Carlson looked after him, and Carlson said, "Now what the hell you suppose is eating them two guys?" What the fuck? That's crazy.